Dawn came to Sunspear as a patient hand smoothing wrinkles from silk. The horizon pried itself open with a line of fire, and the towers of the old palace accepted the light like a benediction. In the Spear Tower, a door opened on quiet hinges. Areo Hoda stepped out to the gallery and leaned the haft of his long axe against the stone. The night had left dew along the balustrade. He set his palms on it and felt the cool dampness seep into his skin. Below, the palace courtyards were a lattice of shade and water, their fountains whispering to basins of blue glazed tile. Waking servants moved in choruses of slippers and murmurs. The banners hung limp and drowsy, sun and spear tangled around their poles. Farther, past the low roofs and sand-colored walls, the sea trembled with coins of light. He stayed still until he could hear gulls and the low thump of water against the piers at the Shadow City. For an hour, he let the day assemble itself. The vendors pushing carts along the cobbles, the crackle of bread ovens, the brine-sweet smell rising from nets on the docks, the laughter of men who had not slept and women plaiting their hair in mirrors of polished bronze. The knowledge came to him like breath. You are safe, you are awake, the man you guard still lives. And then it complicated, as all breaths did, by the things that must be done to keep the truth true. When he turned at last, the light caught the iron studs on his leather and scattered them across the floor. In the great hall, beneath painted screens that once traveled the length of the Rhoyne, Prince Doran sat with a cup cooling between his hands. He did not drink from it. A map lay unfurled beside his elbow, its edges held down by smooth white stones. Rivers were lines of midnight. Mountain passes articulated strokes. The sea, a wash of pale green with flocks of tiny ships, each one a careful brush of ink. Doran looked older than Areo had seen him look in weeks. He had not slept well. The letters from the east had arrived at moonrise. "Your Grace," Areo said. "You heard the bells?" Doran murmured without looking up. His voice was softer than gravity, and yet it always found the ground. "This city wakes like the rest of us. Our chests rise and fall, and in the rising we admit we must endure another day." It was not a question. Areo inclined his head. "A cog has been sighted out past the mother's tears. She carries no colors. The harbor watch says she approaches with the sunrise. She will carry colors when she comes near enough to regret them," said a new voice, bright with sleep-lost amusement. Oberyn Martell came from the gallery as if born from sunlight. His hair lay loose down his back, a river of black with the reddish half-glitter of dawn braided into it, and he gathered it with a length of saffron silk as he crossed the room. He moved like a blade, learning it was a bird and trying both shapes on for size. His smile flashed and vanished. "Brother," he said, and took the chair opposite Doran, and without asking, plucked an orange from a blue-lipped bowl. He cut it deftly with a small knife Areo did not remember seeing in his hand before. Doran did not look at the fruit. His fingers tightened in a silent question along the rim of his cup, a small twist as if testing the clay for cracks. "The letters, the letters," Oberyn echoed, tasting the words and the orange together. He licked his thumb. "Red wax, a dragon stamped in it. Poor wax, mind you, blistered. Sent in haste by someone with jolted hands." Areo watched them both. He had learned his trade in the cool temples of Norvos, and it was a thing they taught there, to read men by their breaths and fingers and the muscles of their mouths. The prince's hands moved little. The brothers' hands moved more, as if they wanted to draw maps in air and leave routes there to confuse their enemies. Doran said, "Read them again." Oberyn obliged, though Areo had no doubt he could recall every line 30 years from now with exact punctuation. The first letter bore the seal of a king who no longer had a city but had not yet abandoned the idea that he was still a king. The second bore no seal at all, only the stuttering marks of a terrified scribe and the self-apology of someone who had decided to go on living. The third had been written, painfully, by a woman who invoked every god she could name, fear humming under the ink like a hive. "They fled," Oberyn said after he had finished. Juice clung to his lower lip. He did not lick it away this time. "The king is dead. The prince and his wife murdered. Tywin's men keep the gates. The queen dowager and the boy." "Not a boy," Doran said. "Not any longer." The young prince escaped to Dragonstone, or to the sea, or to ashes. Salvors do not always know the difference. Sailors have poor imaginations. Ario did not say that sailors had excellent imaginations. He had seen them conjure entire pantheons from the undersides of clouds. And the last letter, Doran placed his hand on it. It was the one from the woman, the one with its ink blurred in places as if the parchment had been folded and pressed to a forehead. Her own hand. Viserys lives. She is with child. Which is a way of saying, Oberyn said, that we will have guests if we invite them and probably even if we do not. The brothers looked at each other. The silence that stretched between them seemed wider than the sea. In it, Ario could hear the faintest lick of water against stone, the high voices of children in a courtyard far away, and under them, the long, dry breath of the desert that was Dorne's true heart. He stood with his hands folded and his eyes on the stone between the princes because that was his place and because, from there, he could see anyone coming through the door before the door knew it was ready to be moved. "Send word to the harbor," Doran said at last. "Whatever sails in, we will not greet with quarrels. I would not have the first sight of our kindness. SB arrows in the air." Oberyn smiled. "You say that as if an arrow can be a kindness." "Sometimes it is," Doran said. "This is not one of those times." He rose slow, careful. Pain stirred somewhere out of sight and put its thumb on his brow. Ario saw it and pretended he had not. Oberyn saw it and refused to pretend anything. He leaned forward as if he would lift his brother with his hands, and then did not. Doran let his palm brush the map once more before he turned from it, as if to promise it that he would return, that he would not leave any place unnamed for long. When they reached the sea balconies, the cog was no longer a rumor. She came in on a tired wind under sails that looked gnawed by goats. Salt had worked white the seams. Someone had painted her hull blue once and given up. Even so, there was a trace of pride in her posture. She kept her bow like a woman who had learned to walk with a book on her head, because someone told her it was elegant, and because the book had stories in it that she never wanted to spill. A narrow pennon crept up to the top of her foremast, one awkward foot at a time. A Targaryen dragon, ink-black and clumsy, breathed a suggestion of fire at no one. The ship said, "I am what you think I am. Please let that be enough." "They tried," Oberyn said, eyes warm and amused and cruel all at once. "Someone cut that with a fish knife." Doran said nothing. By the hour of full daylight, the cog had been coaxed against the quay where the Shadow City's watch had, as ordered, put away their bows and lowered their voices. Ario went down before the princes, never touching his axe to ground because he did not want to bother explaining to the master of the watch why his weapon always stayed in his hand. He waited at the end of the gangplank. He saw sailors first. A Lukosi with jessamine tattooed on her wrist. A Tyroshi with his beard dyed like a pariah's kite. A Westerosi boy who could not stop blinking at the light, salt scabs on his knuckles. Then a woman came, stepping cautiously, holding the rail in both hands. She wore a dark gown ill-made and cleaned too often. The color had been purple once. Her hair had been bound up neatly and had escaped as if it could not help itself. She had that look women had in the month before they birthed, a heaviness and a deliberation that made even the air seem heavier. 2 waiting guards went to help her. She shook her head. She would not be helped until she requested it. It was written in the set of her mouth. It had been written there years ago. Behind her followed a boy with hair like a summer coin. He would not take anyone's hand either, but his refusal was not strength. It was the stubbornness of someone who had been told to be brave for so long that he could not remember the shape of his own fear. He had been shaped around the space the fear would have occupied. His eyes were purple, yes, but not like jewels. They were like the last petals on a bruised bloom that the gardener had missed when he cleaned the beds. The woman put her feet on Dorne with a low, audible sigh. Her hands went to the small of her back. She looked up at Ario then, and there was a queen in the way she did it still. "We are come to Sunspear," she said. "We ask for a cup of water." Ario did not correct her. The princes were behind him, and the city had already found out, and the news would be a bird and a fire and a song before noon. The dragon has come to Sunspear, the queen and the last son. But it was as well to begin with the oldest law. He inclined his head. You will have water, he said, and meant not only the cool cup a servant put into her hands a breath later, but a fountain's right, and shade, and safety for as many days as there were sands in a child's fist. He watched the queen drink. He watched the boy not drink until his mother moved the cup toward him, and he took it almost irritably, as if it were an embarrassment to be thirsty. He drank too fast and coughed, and then shot the cup a wounded look as if it had betrayed him. Areo suppressed the urge to tell him he had time. He did not know yet whether the boy had any time at all. Doran came forward with Oberyn a step behind. Doran inclined his head without bending. Oberyn bent without inclining his head. The queen said words the septas would have polished if there had been any left to polish them, and Doran replied with words the Rhoynar had carried like seed. She opened her fingers and let a small coin fall into Doran's hand. It was not a coin. It was a ring with a dragon eating its tail. Your Grace, Doran said, and if he saw the way her gaze skipped a beat and flinched, Areo did not. Later in the day, 1,000 voices would argue whether Doran had the right to call that woman. Still, Your Grace. The sand would not care, and neither would the sun. But the voices would have their work to do. You are welcome in Dorne. We will give you a bed, and shade, and food. We will give you the sort of peace that does not ask for answers when the questions are not kind. The queen did not weep. She had, Areo guessed, wept all of the water she could spare. Prince Doran, she said. Her voice had a tenderness that did not seem to belong anywhere in the world as it had been for the last years. I knew your sister. She had your hands when she laughed. She touched her belly while she spoke, as if to remind herself of the trifling and absolute fact that something was coming that did not yet have a voice. This is my son. The boy stood as a boy stands when he does not know what else to do with his hands. He had a way of lifting his chin that had not been taught. It had simply sprouted out of him, a plant that found its sun in a particular direction and followed it there. His name traveled the basil and the brick and the bones. Viserys. He did not say it aloud. He did not need to. Oberyn was the first to speak to the boy. Do you ride? He asked cheerfully, as if it would be useful to know whether he could take him to the stables. I ride dragons, the boy said. Oberyn laughed, not mocking, but as if he had been braced for this and quite enjoyed being correct in his fears. As do we all in story. No horses, no sandesteads. Horses, the boy said, after a pause atrocious with the blackbirds of pride and doubt. Yes, I ride horses. Good, Oberyn said. We have those. They went through the carved doors into the cool interior. The palace received them like a tolerant ant. The light filtered through pierced screens and went drowsy. The fountains drew lines across the air. There was the smell of pomegranates crushed for their juice and the smell of steel oiled and coaxed into patience. Children's laughter echoed, then vanished, then returned from some other courtyard. A singer's voice tested a scale and then practiced the same run of 6 notes until they were true. The queen's chambers were prepared in the tower of the sun. Doran did not keep her long with courtesies. He had doctors who could do for her and gentlewomen who would not ask for household gossip before putting cool cloths on her wrists. He knew the business of bringing new people safely through to daylight. The water gardens had taught him it was not so much a mystery as a labor. He asked permission to send his maester, and when the queen nodded, he left her with her son. Oberyn stayed in the corridor for a moment. He watched the boy go in with his mother and then let the door close. He is a bundle of tinder, he said, almost admiring, and the whole world is full of sparks. He is a child, Doran said. Yes, Oberyn said, as if Doran had proved his point for him. A child who tells me he rides dragons. He is what is left, Doran said. He did not look away from the closed door. His voice acquired a new temperature. And if we bring him out into the open as anything besides a nephew or a guest or a boy on a pony, the king in King's Landing will send us a letter, and the hand of the king will follow with something sharper than words. Ghosts ask for blood. The living require it. Do you intend to hide him? Do you intend to parade him through the Shadow City with cymbals and a cart of oranges? Oberyn considered. It would be theatrical. Areo said. My prince. Doran inclined his head. House Ironwood has sent a rider, Areo said, requesting an audience. Oberyn's knife reappeared in his hand and vanished just as quickly. Of course they have. Ironwood always canters around whatever question you are trying to answer and gets to its own end first. How quickly? Doran asked. He waits in the lower hall now. Now? Oberyn repeated, delighted. How efficiently we are loved. Doran went to meet the Ironwood man without sitting first. He had the air of someone who had already moved the next 10 pieces and only discovered on the way down the stairs which path his feet had selected. Areo went a step behind, the music of the palace pooling and redirecting around them. On the way, they met a woman whose veil was sheer and whose eyes missed nothing. And they met a cook who had flour on his knuckles and worry in his eyebrows. And they met a small girl with a dagger strapped to her thigh. She pouted because it bumped her knee. Dorne strolled past them, a snake flexing its length, and the princes threaded through. In the lower hall, where the heat gathered and refused to leave, Anders Ironwood, thin and gray at the temples, the crown of his head startlingly boyish, stood with hands clenched at his back. He had not taken off his riding gloves. He did not bow, not until Doran came almost to him. He bowed then, but he did not make it a habit. He straightened too soon. Prince, he said. His voice had the flavor of gravel. He did not see Areo until he had done all of his prepared courtesies, and then he started fractionally, as if the big man had grown out of the floor. Lord Anders, Doran said, you make good time. Time is made by those who take it, Ironwood said. Word flies. Already I am told the boy with the white hair is here. Oberyn smiled to show how little it cost him to be insulted. Word needs fatter legs if it does not keep pace with its stories. King Robert sent letters on the first tide after he was crowned, Ironwood said, ignoring the needle. He claims the boy a traitor. He claims the boy's mother likewise. He demands the heads of them both. And what would you charge for delivering them? Oberyn asked, light as water in a basin. Ashlar or granite would you like? Lord Anders? Brick? We have a variety. Ironwood shot him a look and then, in the polite cruelty of men who pretend to argue one thing while meaning another, turned back to Doran. I came to ask, as your bannerman, what answer you intend to send. Doran said, as if he had not known that the question would be asked at exactly this time in exactly this place. The old question, what will Dorne do? We cannot be both sand and stone, Ironwood said. When we pretend to be both, someone sinks. Doran unsheathed his patience and laid it on the table. And what would you have me do? He asked. Ironwood did not sit. He did not take water when it was offered to him. He was one of those men who believed thirst to be a kind of virtue. Tell the king we struck down the last of the dragon's fire because it menaced the dry brush that is our lives, he said. Tell him we did not do it because we are afraid. Tell him we did it because we are done. The Princess Elia, may she be sung, was Dornish. She died to that cause. Let it be buried with her. Oberyn's face became a mask of politeness. It needed the mask, or otherwise it would have become something more expensive. You speak of my sister's bones, he said. I speak of the living, Ironwood said. He swallowed what else he might have said and lowered his head a fraction, as if he had realized the edge had drawn blood. I speak of food in the mouths of children in Blackmow, and tea and Talet's leap. The North does not die when its kings vanquish enemies. The Reach does not starve when it bends the knee. Dorne, he stopped. His hands opened and closed. Dorne bleeds differently. My lady wife leads me to the water gardens when I forget that, Doran said. I have not forgotten it today. He let his gaze tilt toward the beam of light that fell through a carved opening above the door, its motes floating lazy as seeds. The queen and her son are here, under our roof, under our law. I will not deliver them, Lord Anders. Ironwood's jaw worked. He had not come expecting otherwise. He had come to disprove his expectations. And past our roof? Past our law? Will you hide them like contraband? Plaster them into walls? I will neither parade them nor smother them, Dorne said. I will think. You will wait until the sea walks to the water gardens, Ironwood said, almost helpless, almost resentful with his own love. That is your way. Prince, the passes will not wait. Marchers listen to the wind. They will cross the bone way with lies hung on their spears. The prince's pass becomes the king's if enough soldiers whisper the right names while they walk. We can whisper too, Oberyn said. Your whisper becomes a shout faster than is useful, Ironwood said, abrupt enough that he startled himself. It made Oberyn laugh. It did not make Dorne smile. They parted with more courtesies than they had been able to begin with. That was the fashion of Dorne, to salt formalities over the first bite, then swear loyalty in an uglier, truer tongue on the way out the door. Areo followed Doran to the upper chambers once more. Well, Oberyn asked when the hall was empty. He tossed the orange knife into the air and caught it again. Will you hide them? Or will you place a crown on the boy and a spear in each of his hands and see how far he can run before anyone bigger notices? I will do what I can to keep my people, Doran said. He put his fingers to his temples for the quietest moment, then let his hands fall. And I will do what we should have done years ago. Oberyn cocked his head. Have fewer sisters? Bind Dorne to itself so tightly that when men elsewhere say Dorne, they do not know whether they mean the princes or the Ironwoods or the Fowlers or the folk of the Greenblood, Doran said. And do it in a fashion that the king cannot call treason for, no matter how badly he wishes to. Ah, Oberyn said. He skewered the orange rind with his little knife and held it up like a pennon. A wedding. Doran glanced toward the closed door behind which a woman panted and fretted and waited for her child. He nodded once as if agreeing with someone only he could hear. Leora Martell had not imagined her morning would start with being told she must marry a dragon. She did not immediately think the nurse who woke her was speaking in allegory. Leora prided herself on being literal in the mornings. She sat up, sank out of a dream of white salt flats and mirrors of water, and frowned at her cousin Myrai's voice. A dragon? She said, and then laughed. Because if there were a dragon in the palace, its breath would have melted all the silver off all the goblets, and her father would have shouted, and the children would have crowed and run to the water gardens to throw themselves in the pools. My princess, Myrai said, wringing her hands. Do not laugh. You must come to the prince now. Now. Leora grew serious. She had had practice with it. She put her feet on the tiles, let the coolness consider the soles, and got up. She accepted the robe Myrai held out. It was not the one she would have chosen, but Myrai's fingers trembled around the sash. So Leora took that tremble into herself and steadied it by looking at it. She had learned that trick at 13 when she had been told to keep a secret for the first time, and had kept it for longer than anyone would have thought a secret could live. She put her hair in a knot and covered it with a light scarf because the corridors were drafty at this hour, and because she had once liked how it looked and Habit was a faithful dog. The prince received her in the room with the Royns painted screens. They were as vivid now as the first time she had seen them, as if the water had not yet dried and would take the boats away if anyone took their eyes off the horizon. Doran stood by the map. Oberyn lounged on the table beside it, balanced on a hip and an elbow with the kind of ease that made Leora grit her teeth and then forgive him for everything not less than 3 heartbeats afterward. You called me cousin, she said. Her voice fell into the formal channels it knew how to fill. Leora was not a direct child of the sitting prince. She was a cousin twice and a niece by marriage, the kind of kin who filled out a family's table and took on tangling duties quietly. She had grown into the place between places. Fit her well. Doran did not prolong the leaf tumble of preliminaries. A guest has come to Sunspear, he said. The queen from King's Landing and her son. It ran through her like a chill. Leora managed not to glance at Oberyn. She had heard the songs in the market the day after they had stopped being songs and started being news. She folded her hands. Is it true, then, that the king is dead? That the city has fallen? Yes. Doran put his hand on the edge of the map. I have confirmed as much as it is safe to confirm. And you called me, Leora said. I am occupied with the accounts of the water gardens this week. If I do not finish, the figs will expect to be paid, and that will be awkward when they themselves become the coin. Oberyn smiled as if the figs would tell a rude joke in her presence. Doran did not. I called you, he said, because the queen is with child, and because her son is a boy of 8 years who tells my brother he rides dragons. 8, Leora said. She set the number down in her mind as if it were a cup sh. He must remember not to overturn. A child. Most princes are, Oberyn said. Doran touched his fingers to the little painted triangle that was Sunspear. He did it as carefully as he had touched the queen's ring. We must do something that will appear, to the outside eye, both gracious and reasonable, he said. We must also do something that will keep as much of Dorne as possible from being torn by lords who have their own ideas of what graciousness and reason look like when they wear armor. You want to arrange a marriage, Leora said. She heard her voice from a distance and admired how cleanly it did not shake. You want to marry your 8-year-old guest to a Martell. You want a public vow with Rhoynish water and Martell's son. You want the boy bound to Dorne so tightly that to reach for him is to reach for us as well. Sometimes I forget why I am fond of you, Oberyn said, approving. Then you remind me. Leora did not turn to him. She met Doran's gaze. Would you have me? The boy must not marry anyone without a name that pulls as much as it pushes, Doran said. I will not call for an Ironwood wife and expect Anders to sit quietly by the fountain. I will not choose a fowler and watch the Danes decide what that means about the sky. You have a way of being a Martell that reminds people what it means without scratching them bloody with it. You walk in between, and you are not a child. Leora drew a breath. The brick under her bare feet retained a whisper of the night's coolness. She listened to it while the rest of her blood rearranged its furniture. She thought of the children in the water gardens, the way they splashed at her and made her pretend to be drowned and then begged her to rise again. She thought of the orphan bard she had visited last month on the Greenblood, the old woman with inked hands who had taken her wrists in both of hers and told her, without irony, that any man who thought he owned the water was already owned by it. She thought of the market women who had slipped her the good oranges and the bad news and let her stand with them, arms crossed, as they watched their sons throw pebbles at a wall simply because it was there. She thought of a child of 8 who had learned the angle of arrogance as one learns to keep a cup from spilling in a moving cart. An unconsummated marriage, she said. Doran's expression did not change. Of course. Public, Leora said. Binding, with witnesses who will not later claim to have been overwhelmed by dust. Words spoken in the Rhoyner style and in the style of the September. The Mother's grace invoked and Mother Rhoyne's as well. Green blood, Oberyn said. He had started to swing a foot and made himself stop. It was the only visible sign that the currents under his skin had quickened. The orphans will come if you ask politely, and if you ask impolitely, they will come to tell you to ask politely and then stay anyway. Leora nodded. The green blood is our honesty, she said. The seas are for other people. We have the river. She did not say, though the 3 of them heard the unsaid, that the river ran a long way inland, away from the eyes on the sea. You will do this then, Doran said, and it was not a question. He did not ask questions for which he did not already possess the answers. You will let the boy share your name. For a time, Leora said, until he can carry the weight of it for himself, or until the weight crushes us all. But we will not say that aloud in the morning. She squared her shoulders. Not to flatter you with the illusion that my consent is necessary. It is, in this case, convenient only. But yes, if we do this, we will do it in daylight, with the city watching, with the old oaths. We will make something that can be seen and touched and picked apart and put back together again. Oberyn hopped off the table and crossed to her. He took her hands and kissed them both with an elaborate flourish that was as much mockery as affection. You will be very beautiful in your bridal linen, he said. The boy will remember every thread. When he is 20, he will wake in a tent in the middle of nowhere and think about the shape of the light on your sleeve and decide he understands love. Perhaps he will be right. She did not pull her hands away. When he is 20, she said, I hope he remembers the words and not the linen." She freed one hand and touched Oberyn's cheek as if he were a child who had scraped his knee and was pretending it did not hurt. Then she turned to Doran. "When?" "Tomorrow," Doran said. "Today," Oberyn countered, "before anyone has time to adjust their swords for it." "Tomorrow," Doran repeated with the authority of the sunrise. "This afternoon I will write the letters. The river folk must be summoned with courtesy. The sept must be cleaned. The queen must be asked. I will not hurry a woman in her condition to make a picture that pleases anyone." "And Ironwood?" Leora asked. "Ironwood knows," Doran said, "that I will call his people as I call all of ours. They will come to watch. They will come to count. And they will come because they would have always come. I do not flatter myself that I move them much. The river does it. And the thought of the king's men trying to cross it without getting wet." Leora went from the princes with her mind engraving itself with lists. She would need linen, bread. Does one feed an unconsummated groom unripe fruit to remind him of winter? No, that was a joke and not a good one. There would need to be cups and a rope for the knot tying, and someone must sew a strip of Martell silk and a strip of Targaryen silk together without making an awkward seam. She would need to send for the woman on the barge who had held her hands, because there were words Leora wanted said in a voice older than hers. She would need to write to her mother. She did not go to her own chambers first. She went to the water gardens. The road disappointed its own name. Here was no road. Really, only a series of beaten tracks and a willingness to follow them. Sand carts rolled slowly. The escort Doran insisted on were discreet. Men for horses' length behind, wearing plain clothes, with the particular plainness that proclaimed them for what they were. Leora let the wind take the scarf from her hair. It flowed behind her like an exhausted bird and then rested around her shoulders. Syrupy perfume came off the date palms. Cicadas rasped. Somewhere, a boy shrieked delighted and was shushed and shrieked again, defiant. The water gardens rose from the sand like stern joy. Nymeria's gift to Moors had been a palace that was not a weapon, which was a kind of war like any other. Leora had loved the pool that ran narrow and shallow along the north colonnade since she was small, because she could always pretend it was a river that chose to go to sea only when it was promised a story. She walked along it now and let her hand drag through the water. A child ran across the tiled yard with his hair streaming behind him and threw himself into the pool in a fervent surrender. He surfaced with an expression of betrayed triumph. The steward saw her and cursed and then made his expression into something like delight because he loved her and adored the children and hated surprise. She patted his hot forearm and told him not to fetch the good cups. She had come for faces, not for honeyed wine. She went into the Hall of Children and sat on the steps where anyone who needed to talk could find her. And of course, because of course they did. A girl of 9 who was certain she would grow a tail if she spent another whole day in the water came to tell her about the shape of her new shadow. A boy of 4 whose mother had moved to the city to marry a mason and who did not understand why everything suddenly smelled like dust came and refused to sit closer than 2 arms lengths away. But he did not leave. Leora spoke to them. She spoke to the nurse who wanted Leora to ask the prince to forbid figs because they made the children havoc. She spoke to a woman who had a scar down the side of her mouth and a soft voice and who would not look Leora in the eye. She coaxed from her a story about a husband who had lost his work, and she made the sum in her head that would balance the matter. She let all of it remind her why she was not allowed to think of herself as anything other than a piece of the place where she stood. Then she went to the small room where letters were stored, with their strings and seals, and she wrote to her mother. She did not tell her mother what Doran had asked. She told her mother about the children. She told her about a boy who collected blue stones and believed they would whisper to each other in the night if she piled them correctly. She told her about the woman whose scar made her smile look like wind trying to be fire and getting some good ideas. She wrote about the way the light fell through vine leaves and made maps, and about the way a cup of water held all the sea and was also only a cup. Her mother would read it and shake her head and think, "My Leora is trying to say something without saying it," and she would write back something about the state of the lemons and Norvos, and both letters would do their work. By noon, the palace had decided to possess the news. It sat on it like a hen on a hot egg. Men came and went who had no business to attend to. Women went about their business with a particular sharpened attention to listen to their bracelets and the sounds of their slippers. On the harbor, gulls made a relentless, squalid racket. The queen slept and did not. She sat at the window more than anyone wanted her to and watched the sea. She held a hand under her belly sometimes as if to prop it. Her fingers had a way of silently counting. The boy, left to himself for a while to be alone or to become dangerous, as boys do when confined, did neither. He drifted into a courtyard little used, the one with the red tiles that had been laid a century ago by a man who had believed sequences of numbers could be made beautiful if they repeated properly. He examined the fountain, kicked the grout between tiles, and discovered a thin kitten under a bench. He pretended not to care. He sat on the bench. He did not coax the kitten. He waited until, without being coaxed, it came out and stepped across the tiles with the contempt all cats feel for people who believe themselves original, and climbed onto the boy's knee and began to knead with its porcelain paws. Viserys flinched and then stayed very still. The kitten kneaded. It tucked its face into the fabric of the boy's gown and settled there with the huge trust that sometimes looks exactly like arrogance. The boy had that look, too. After a while, he laid his hand on the cat's back, uncertainly, like a man putting his palm on a door he is not sure will open. "My prince," Areo said, because someone had to speak to him and because Areo was less interested in whether anyone called the boy your grace than he was in whether the boy learned the names of the guards who would keep him from falling into fountains. Viserys put his chin up. "Are you a knight?" he asked. Areo did not smile. "I am a guard." "A guard of what?" "The prince," Areo said. "The palace. The idea that mornings should begin slowly." Viserys thought about this. "Are you a dragon slayer?" "No." "Good," the boy said. "We will have dragons again." He stroked the kitten's back not unkindly. "Do dragões e chiquitins?" Areo asked mildly. "Only the wicked ones?" Viserys said, then frowned, because it had come out sounding childish, and the kitten was kneading again, and his lip wanted very much to do something that he could not permit. He scratched the kitten between the ears with a seriousness that would have done for signing a treaty. Areo watched him and the fountain and the sky beyond the carved opening, and because he was a man who never wasted breath, he said what he needed to say and nothing that he did not. "Tomorrow you will be wed." The boy's head cut toward him. He made himself older with the movement. Boys learned how to do that at alarming speed. "To whom?" "To a lady of House Martell," Areo said. He gave the boy the shape of her with the economy of a soldier. "She is kind, she is not cruel. She swims with the children without telling them how they should swim. She is not easily imitated. She stands in a doorway like someone who knows which room is on fire." The boy's throat worked. "I am to be made a prisoner, then?" he said, with almost theatrical bitterness. He had learned bitter bravado from someone who had learned it because there had been nothing else left to learn. "You will be made a guest for a long time," Areo said. "And when you leave, if you leave, you will go with more names than you brought." Viserys thought of names as if they were apples. Some had worms. Some were not ripe. Some were red simply because they had been painted that way, which was useful and which was deception and which did not matter. He rubbed the kitten's ear with his knuckle. It purred with a frequency that could sting the teeth. He lifted his chin again. "Is she very old?" Areo tilted his head. "She is older than you are." "I am not a child," the boy said, sitting straighter, which was what children said when their spines were still finding their height. "Neither is she," Areo said. "She will not try to be your mother." Viserys had to swallow before he could speak. "No one can be," he said, and it did not sound brave because it was true. He glared at the kitten, as if it were responsible for everything, then gentled his hand on its skull. "Will you bring me a sword?" "Not today," Areo said. "Today you will learn the words you must say. Tomorrow you will say them. Then we will see what needs defending and what needs cutting." In the evening, Leora went to the river. The barge lay moored under the leaning shade of 2 green willows that had not yet forgiven themselves for growing up in sand. A dozen lanterns fluttered. Their light added a kind of broth to the air. Smells came up. Herbs bruised underfoot, river salt, the sharp ghost of fish. The same old woman who had held Leora's hands last month stepped from the deck to the shore with the exacting grace of someone who had walked far and remembered every foot. "You came," Leora said. "I am asked to come," the woman said, with a tartness that did not hide her pleasure. Her hair had been braided back and threaded with strips of river reed. The patterns meant something. Leora had never learned their names. "I do not always come when princes call, but I come when the water calls and the shape of trouble in the air smells like old wine." "There must be water," Leora said. "There must be words." "There will be words," the woman said, and smiled then, sudden, mischievous, as if she had just stolen a pomegranate. "There are always words. The matter lies in which ones you choose to let go of your mouth. You know why I've asked." "I know what men say," the woman said. "I know what the river says. I know what your face says." Leora put a hand to her scarf, then put it down. "What does my face say?" "That you would like to be the kind of person who thinks before she leaps. But when you leap properly." Leora breathed out. The river made little mouths of itself along the bank. "Will you do it?" she asked. "I will hold the rope," the woman said simply. "I will tie the knot. I will say that the river witnessed it and you must not pretend otherwise next year when the winds are wrong. I will tell the girls to sing the right verse. I will not keep the flies from your eyes. That is your own matter. I will not keep any man's gossip from his own tongue. That too is your own matter." She tipped her head, and the reeds in her hair made a small sound. "It is a good thing sometimes," she said, "to marry a child to a woman. There have been worse devices in this country, but do not expect the device to be more than a stalk holding up a heavy fruit." "The Queen," Leora said, and came to the part that had been turning in her like a stubborn hinge, "is near the time. I do not know how near. We must not hurry her. We must not make this feel like a knife at her back." "She will not be hurried," the woman said. "No more than anybody hurries a river. It moves through you and out of you when it chooses. You may stand on its bank and sing, but you will not change what it is." "Will you come in the morning?" "I will sleep on the barge," the woman said. "I will send my granddaughter to wake the other women when the light learns to speak. Go home. Eat a small supper. Do not practice your words too much. Let one surprise live through the night. It will give you something the next day." Leora left the river with that instruction coiled in her hair. She returned to the palace through the dusk. The city was creaking into its evening shape. Rugs laid down in doorways, knives laid aside, lamps coaxed into obedience, men leaning on lintels with their arms crossed not because they were angry but because they had no better place to put them. A child ran past her with a handful of figs and a look of invented guilt. The smell of meat cooking was almost aggressive. Someone sang in the next street over the refrain of a song so old that its meaning had become a place to put other meanings into. In the Tower of the Sun, the Queen sat by a window with her hands on her belly, her feet on a stool. She looked out at a sea that had pretended innocence all day and would pretend it again tomorrow. Her face was paler than it had been at noon. When Leora entered, she turned slowly, as if her bones were full of bells. "Princess," she said. The title came easily to her. She had lived her life handing out titles to please and to pull and had learned to make their syllables do work. "You are Leora." Leora bowed. She did. Not curtsy. That was not her habit. "Your Grace," she said. The Queen's mouth thinned a little, in pain or humor or both. "I have been and not been that for most of my life," she said. "Today it is a hat that sits correctly enough." She breathed out. "I have been told of the plan. I have been told my son will be wed. It will not change who he is," Leora said. She wished that were true. It would change everything, though possibly not in the ways that a man at a table would calculate. It would change the boy's sleep. It would change the way his jaw moved when he was stubborn. The Queen's hands were as beautiful as anything Leora had seen in the last bad year in the world. They were steady over the child inside her. They did not clench. "All the world seems defined by the words we don't speak aloud at the right time," the Queen said. It may be that a knot of silk will do as well as a sword in some moments. She looked up at Leora then with a swiftness that was not easily borne. Her eyes were not the exact shade of the boy's. They had grown their own depths. They had learned new colors. "Will you be kind to him?" she asked. Leora said, "I cannot promise that I will always be gentle. I can promise that I will not be cruel without cause." The queen's mouth twitched. "You will not last long here if you are gentle," she said. "But thank you for not lying to me." She tipped her head as if listening to some inside music. "I would ask another thing of you. When he is foolish, and he will be foolish because most of us are most of the time, will you remember that he has not been taught how to be anything else? Teach him another way and blame him less for not learning it instantly." "I can do that," Leora said. She wanted, for one absurd heartbeat, to put her head on the queen's shoulder and tell her that she was afraid. She did not. She kept the fear on its leash, and it walked beside her, well behaved. "Good," the queen said. She opened her hands, then closed them. "I am told the river folk will watch. That is appropriate. It was always the rivers that saved us." It was Leora's turn to let her mouth twitch. "It was," she said, "also the rivers that drowned us. That is what it means to be saved," the queen said. "To give up the air you are certain you need and come up with your lungs pulled inside out and discover that you have been reborn with them made larger." When Leora left, she did not go to her own chambers still. She went to a balcony and stood there until the light went out of the sky and until the stars began to do the quiet work they always did. She thought of the rope with its knot. She thought of small hands threaded into it. She tried not to think of the look the boy would give her in the weeks to come, the look he would not know he wore, in which he asked her to be something to him that no one could be and that he would punish her for not being. She did not count those punishments a thing to fear. She had been scolded by children before. She had been cursed by grown men. She thought instead of the choices Dorne had. Marriage was a way of building a bridge where no one had wanted a road. The morning came too soon and exactly when it must. It began in courtyards and in throats before it made up its mind to sky. The palace hummed. The words traveled down the halls at different speeds. Leora put on her linen and did not choose the finest. She put a strip of sun-colored silk through her hair and let it hang. She let 2 maidservants paint her hands with henna. The designs were not elaborate. The mourning did not require elaboration. Myrai fussed. Leora took the fussing into herself and made it into an appetite for bread, which she would need. Along the Greenblood, the orphan barge had gathered its singers. Women in river-brown robes stepped on shore with their hair bound with reeds and their wrists jingling with shell bracelets. A boy with a drum sat cross-legged and looked as if he might fall asleep on it and fall into the cadence anyway. Men gathered. They wore, as they always did on such mornings, everything they owned, so that the day would not be able to trick them later into thinking they could be suddenly deprived of any part of their lives. On the shore, a platform had been built and dressed with woven mats. It had the best possible vantage for the river. Close enough to touch, but not so close that one step taken during a vow would dunk everyone into muddied promise. The rope lay coiled in a tidy figure 8. Cups stood ready. A septon had come, pale with worry, and he stood back and tried to look like an ornament. The woman from the barge stood before the river with her hands on her hips and the expression of someone who had decided to be pleased with the morning or else teach it why it was a fool. Leora stood under an awning, where the air was cooler and where a few elderly people had already taken seats, because being old in Dorne meant you got to sit down whenever you liked. Areo took up a position that permitted him to see everything he needed to see. Oberyn moved among the people as if he were a lion who had decided to be a cat for an hour. Doran stood apart, his hands behind his back, his face the studied dispassion that meant his heart was full to bruising. The queen came. She did not pretend that walking was easy. She had no use for pretense. Several women had the sense to make a chair with their hands and shoulders for her to sit upon and to lower her into it like a precious bundle. She thanked them. She did not have to. She thanked them. Viserys came with 2 grim boys his own age who were meant to be his shadow. He wore linen as well, white as lilies. The wind investigated it and found it adequate. He had a ribbon at his throat, pale violet, that someone had insisted upon and that he had tolerated with martyrdom. He looked over the gathered faces and discovered they were not cheering. He scowled, then mastered it. He had mastered himself a great deal. In the years that had torn his family apart, he kept discovering parts of his face that other people could read. He looked up then and saw Leora. She did not try to look like something she was not. That would have been a waste of both of them. She stood quietly with her hands folded, and when he approached, she inclined herself and said, "Good morning," as if they were to ride together and not to tie one another into a knot. "Good morning," he said, and made it a disdain, because that was the safest place to put it. Then, as if, without meaning to, he had discovered he had nowhere else to be, he stood beside her under the awning while the river gathered itself. The woman from the barge raised her hands. The boy pushed his drum forward with his knee to keep from falling asleep. The river took a breath. So did the crowd. The woman said words in Rhoynar. The children who had been taught to say them answered, badly but gloriously. The Septon stepped forward hesitantly and added his portion. And then it was the part Leora had not practiced too often. She stepped forward to the rope. She lifted it with her hands. Viserys, instructed, did the same. The woman's voice went lower, almost kind, as if she were speaking to two children who had caught a frog and were deciding whether to love it or to drop it because it felt cold. Leora wrapped the rope around Viserys' wrist and then her own, and then around his and then hers, spiraling it with the gentleness one uses to dress a wound. She tied the knot easily, the way she had tied knots since she had been small. It lived under her fingers for a moment, then grew still. The woman laid her hands on it and breathed on it. The breath smelled like mint. "Say the words," the woman said. Leora looked at Viserys. His eyes were very bright because he was furious or frightened. It did not matter which. He looked very young. He looked like a boy who wanted to be anything else and who did not know how to ask instruction without making it a dare. "I will guard what is placed in my keeping," Leora said. Rhoynar had fewer words for exclusion than the Sept did, and she used them anyway because simplicity was another way to be precise. "I will be the shade when the sun is too much. I will take the heat when the night is too cold. I will not keep you from the river if it must take you. I will not pretend the river is something else." Viserys swallowed. He might have wanted to say other words. He said the ones he had. "I will remember the shade when I am warm," he forced out. "I will not mistake the rope for a leash. I will not bite the hands that tie it. I will learn something I do not already know." The woman's mouth quirked. "That is a very good vow," she said, and if she did not quite manage to keep the surprise from her voice, it was the sort that flavors water and makes it better. The Septon spoke the names that the mother and the father were supposed to hear, and invoked the stranger because he always did, and then Leora and Viserys drank from the same cup. It was only water. It might as well have been wine from a vine that had grown on the side of the world. The crowd made the number of the day with its breath. The rope lay warm. The knot was a knot. It could be untied. But not this week, not in public, and not without everyone knowing exactly what had been done. The queen smiled, and at the same moment, gasped. It was not the gasp of someone who had forgotten to breathe. It was the sound of a woman whose body had decided to become two bodies. Leora's hands went cold while her blood went hot. Several women moved together as if they had been waiting for this exact music cue and had rehearsed their choreography. Dorne walked quickly for a man who did not walk quickly. The woman from the barge made a long sound of comfort in a language older than anything that had been spoken in King's Landing yesterday. The river kept doing the work it always did. Leora untied the rope. She put her hand on Viserys' wrist longer than was necessary, and then let him go because he had to begin to learn at once what it meant to have been bound and then freed. The queen made no speeches. She did not require oblations to her pain. She let herself be lifted and carried toward the water gardens, because the water gardens were a place where children came through to the air and learned it was their own. Viserys followed because he could not help himself. Leora kept pace with him and now and again let her sleeve brush his sleeve, because she did not know if he would otherwise remember, in an hour, that someone had stood beside him while he watched his mother's face change to a thing no son forgets. It was a hot day, and then it was a long one. In the airy chamber the prince had filled with breezes. They had lives of their own, those breezes. They nosed through the screens. They pawed the rugs. The queen labored. Women brought cloths. Women spoke. Women argued quietly. The septon stood in a corner and muttered prayers that sounded, in his mouth, more like apologies. The woman from the barge came and went like a river in a drought, drying here, running there, never where anyone doubted it mattered. Doran did not come in. Oberyn came and leaned in the doorway like a man leaning on a spear, and then left because his jaw had begun to glitter with the effort of keeping it shut. Viserys sat for a while outside the door, his elbows on his knees, his hands clenched. He looked like a boy trying not to cry because that was always the game, and it was insulting now to be forced to play it. Then he stood and paced. Leora went to sit with him. She did not tell him it would be well. She did not say that men and women had been born every day since the first day, and so it was not special. She did not remind him that his mother had done this before. She kept her mouth as quiet as she could keep her heart. After a time, she told him a story. It was one she had heard in the market in the Shadow City from a seller of almonds who claimed to have married 7 times and to have lost 3 wives to ships, 2 to the desert and 2 to boredom. In the story, a woman made a boat out of a carpet and folded it so well and so carefully that it could carry her across a pool without getting her sandals wet. The woman in the story arrived at her own house and no one recognized her because she had come by water and therefore, she argued, had been remade. She had to produce the mole on her left shoulder before her mother stopped crying and decided that remade did not mean erased. One of the children from the water gardens crept into the corridor while Leora was speaking. He lay on his belly and rested his chin on his hands and listened as if the words were small fish that would jump into his mouth if he waited long enough with his mouth open. Viserys pretended not to see him and then, after 3 sentences, stopped pretending not to, because pretending made listening more difficult. Another child came and stood behind the first. In the way of children, they made a fortress in the corner with cushions and a rug and one of Leora's sashes and claimed it a country. The country lasted 11 minutes before it fell to civil war and then reconstituted itself under a new name and an elaborate system of pebble taxes. The children forgot to listen. Viserys did not. Leora told the story to its end, which had always struck her as abrupt. It was not a story about endings. It was about getting wet or not getting wet. Perhaps there were other parts. Perhaps the almond seller had been hungry and had only told enough to buy his way to supper. She thought about that and then told another story, this one a simple thing from the old river words, about a fish who did not understand that the boat it swam beneath threw shade for a reason that was not kindness. She told it because Viserys did not need to be consoled. He needed to be given a shape into which he could pour his shaking. When the child came, the woman from the barge called out in a voice that made the dust in the corners find their parents. The sound went through the palace. The city heard it and grew still for a breath. The summer heat shifted along its spine. The guards in the courtyard lowered their heads as if acknowledging a decent blow. Areo adjusted his grip on his axe and then put it back, conscious of the foolishness of the gesture, and content with it anyway. The queen did not scream. She made a noise that belonged to no one but herself and then exhaled and put her head back. The women laughed and wept in one sound that had been hummed into their bones by the women before them and the women before them. Viserys' feet carried him forward and then remembered their manners and halted. He did not cry. Leora suspected he would do that later in a place he could lie to. She stood with him and breathed with him. She does not die, she thought, and did not say it because she was not the sort of person to say out loud the hope that had just turned into fact and tempt the nearest god to pin her like a beetle. The women handed the infant, a little red and very loud, to Leora for a moment while the queen drank water. Leora felt the weight of the new thing in her arms and did not make the foolish pledge to love her forever. It would not be forever. Nothing was. But she let her face arrange itself into the sort of smile she wanted to have made in the hour she met her closest fate, if anyone had handed her to the world. The queen said, in a voice that could still laugh even when it was shaking, "She is Daenerys." and then, "Give her back to me." Later, when the heat dimmed and the river cooled more quickly than did the walls of the palace, they brought the boy in to see his sister. He looked defensive, as if prepared to be accused of something in the presence of a creature who could not yet judge him for it. He looked at the infant for a long time, his face arranged in neutrality that did not hold. He opened his mouth and closed it. He said at last, "She is very small. She will always be," the queen said. "To you, she will grow larger than your fear," Leora said, surprising herself. The queen turned her head and met Leora's eyes with something like gratitude and something else that Leora chose to see as trust. Daenerys slept. The queen slept. The palace pretended to sleep and did not. Outside, in the lower halls, lords who had come from the high deserts and the passes argued by saying nothing, and by saying it contemptuously, and by occasionally lifting their chins and counting to 7. Ironwood ate dates and spit the seeds into a napkin and threw the napkin away as if executing a traitor. The Fowler woman sat very straight and spoke to no one but the old woman from the barge, to whom she told the history of a village that had moved 3 times because the wind kept rearranging its position. The old woman pronounced this wise. Oberyn went to the stables and, finding no one who wanted to be charmed, spent the night combing his horse's mane. Areo took his place outside the queen's chamber and watched the corridor straighten under the gaze. Every so often the small children who had made their country in the corner would wake and peer out of their fortress and then, embarrassed to be seen, pretend to be asleep again. In the small hours, Dorne came. He did not stay long. He looked at the sleeping queen and the sleeping child, at the boy who had fallen into an ungainly doze with his mouth open like any other boy his age, at Leora in her chair with her hands loose and dangerous in her lap. He nodded to Areo. He said nothing out loud. He went away, muttering the list of names he would print on letters in the morning. When the morning did come, a second morning in a row with too many turning points for anyone to be allowed to believe in coincidence, there were more people in the courtyard than had lived in Sunspear last year. The story had Beck. Omit. Dorne had been hungry. They stood with their arms crossed like their mothers and watched the doors. They did not cheer. They did not boo. Dorne did not do what anyone told it. It did what it had to do and then found a way to pretend it had always wanted that result. The rope had been tied. The baby had been born. The queen had not died. Those were the facts. The facts made the air in the palace smell more complicated. "Lord Anders," Dorne said, when Ironwood was shown into his study after breaking his fast on a handful of pride and a handful of bread. "Your Highness," Ironwood said. He did not bow this time, which told Dorne that the man's knees felt like stones this morning. "You have heard," Dorne said. "I have eyes," Ironwood said. "Does the king in King's Landing have your letters yet?" "They are on the water," Dorne said. "What do they say?" "That a woman and 2 children have come under my protection," Dorne said. "That they will be safe so long as they are my guests. That further questions about marriage law in Dorne should be addressed to the nearest river." Ironwood made a noise that wanted to be a laugh and only found one note of it. "Anders Fowler says his men are muttering. His men always mutter. That is not the same as doing. Will you call your banners?" Dorne lifted his gaze to the window. The light has changed, he thought, the way it is allowed to change when a child arrives. "I will invite my lords to the water gardens to eat sweet fruit and count their grandchildren," he said. "I will not call them to war. Not this week. Not ever, if I can avoid it." "You cannot avoid it," Ironwood said, and tiredness had crept into his voice like ants. "War is a child you do not want who nevertheless will be born." "Some children," Dorne said, "learn to become other things. Put a sword in the boy's hand," Ironwood said, with the obstinacy of a simple prescription. "Send him to Ironwood. Let my sons teach him to ride properly. Let him learn the bone way. Let him crack his nails on the Prince's Pass. Do not teach him to sit. He will rust. Do not tell me how to keep him," Dorne said, now with some warmth. "He will learn to ride. He will learn to sit. He will learn to wait. He will learn a thing none of your sons learned." "What is that?" Ironwood demanded. "How to smile at snakes." How to be the water, Doran said, and the way he said water made it sound like a weapon. After Ironwood left, Oberyn slipped into the room with the sticky grace of someone who had been listening for a while. He balanced a pomegranate on the back of his hand and then let it roll down his forearm to his elbow and back. "He is not entirely wrong," he said. "He is not entirely anything," Doran said. "That is the trouble. He is many things to many men. That is a skill if you can wield it. It is a wound if you cannot." "And the boy?" Oberyn asked. "What will we make him?" "We will not make him anything," Doran said. "We will attempt to make a place in which he can choose the thing he is without burning the rest of us to ash in the process." "That is not a policy," Oberyn said, grinning. "No," Doran said. "It is a prayer. It would be easy to think, if you were standing on the far side of the sea and hearing only bell-muffled news from Lys or Pentos, that the marriage was a straw. You could blow it away with a breath. It would be even easier to think, if you were sitting in a chair at the mouth of the King's Hand's offices, that the baby was an inconvenience you could fix with a ship. Men had been fixing inconvenient babies with ships for as long as there had been water. But Dorne did not move like the other kingdoms. It lay under the sun and let the sun insist on it and turned what that insistence did to it into a culture with sharp angles and soft corners. It survived on a sentence built without apology. "We decide what we are." On the third day after the marriage, which was the first day after the birth on which no one fainted in a hallway and had to be fussed over with fans, Leora found Viserys in the practice yard, sweating furiously with a wooden sword. Oberyn was showing him how to stand and not fall over. This involved making the boy hop like a frog and then like a crane and then like something that had no analog in the natural world and required giggling if it was to be done at all. Viserys did not giggle. He scowled and hopped and tried not to look at the two other boys who watched with interest that would have turned into ridicule if Leora had not been within earshot. "You stand as if the ground is trying to trick you," Oberyn said. "It is. Let it trick you once. Learn." Viserys lunged. The wooden sword smacked the post with a crack that felt good to him and therefore was insufficient for instruction. Oberyn did not praise him. "Again," he said, "make the crack sing. You are hitting it with a stick. Hit it like truth." Leora waited until the boy's mouth began to set into a line that would cause both of them trouble later if she did not redirect it now. Then she stepped forward and put her hand on the back of his wrist. He flinched because he had not seen her and because he had not learned that some touches changed the angle of the world in a way that made work easier. She adjusted his grip. She did it without ceremony. "Now," she said, "breathe before you strike. Use your breath to draw the line you mean to cut." Oberyn watched her. He liked men who cut lines, but he liked women who moved lines better. Viserys obeyed. As if obedience were an insult, he had to get out fast. He lunged again. The crack was a little cleaner. His mouth did not open to receive praise. Leora did not pour it out on him, which pleased Oberyn because it showed that Leora had no patience to waste either. The kitten watched from the wall, a pale scrap of sovereignty, dismissive. In the afternoons, when the light shaded the courtyards enough that reading would not burn the pages, Leora sat with the queen and the babe. Daenerys slept in a basket because she was too small to have an enemy. The queen talked and did not talk. Leora told her the things the palace did not pass along. The way the market had slowed and then resumed, as all markets do. The way the fish had been expensive and then cheap and would be expensive again. The way a woman at a corner had said, with humor in her mouth, that Dorne had married a boy and given birth to a girl and perhaps the gods would forgive them for their mismatched timing. The queen listened. She did not laugh often. She did laugh sometimes. When she did, her eyes tightened as if laughter hurt in ways she had previously been told it would not. The letters went out with the morning tide each day, in different directions, because you never knew which way a thing must travel to be believed. They went to King's Landing and to the Reach. They went to Lord Manwoody and to Skirich. They went to a woman in Norvos who would not like them and would answer anyway. They went to the Rhoyne. The river was better at delivering letters than men were. You told a freight what you needed and it came back with the answer 2 summers later, and the answer, softened by distance, would heal you better than the one you would have wanted to hear immediately in a rage. On the 7th day, A ship with fine sails slipped into the harbor and did not declare itself. Areo did not wake the garrison. He went down to the quay himself. In the shadow of a pile of coiled rope, he watched the men who disembarked. One walked like a wolf taught to play at court. His hair was grayer at the edges than such men like to admit, and his hands had the scars of someone who told you he had not worked and then showed you his palms. He let the harbor officer hold him long enough to pretend he had been held, and then he came up the long slope toward the palace. "Sir," Areo said evenly, when they were close enough that he could smell the washed leather of the man's boots. "Just a man," the man said, "who knows where to aim a question." He let his eyes flick once to the tower where the queen's room had become more than a room. "I have come to ask after my kin." "Your kin in Dorne," Areo said, investigating the words like an odd fruit. "Kin wherever kin plant themselves," the man said. He stood easily under the weight of Areo's gaze. Few men did. "My name is Cunnington." "Ah," Areo said without moving. Some names did their own moving. They brought him before Dorne, because Dorne collected men who did not try to pretend the familiar grimaces of ambition were anything other than what they were. Cunnington bowed like a man who knew why people bowed to one another. He did not call Dorne Highness or Grace. He said Prince. He did not ask for wine and then decline it. He let it be poured. He did not wet his lips and then set it down untasted to sour into righteousness. He drank, put some blood back in his face. "You have a guest," he said. "I have several," Dorne said. "Whether they are all welcome remains to be seen." Cunnington smiled the tired smile of a man who had not been surprised in public since he was 20. "I have come to pledge myself to the young prince." "To Viserys," Dorne said, naming him for what he was instead of the title Cunnington had avoided. "To the boy who is not dead," Cunnington said, holding Dorne's gaze. "Do not make the mistake," Oberyn said from the shutters, "of believing that because he is not yet dead, he is beyond the reach of anyone who would like to do him that favor." He stepped forward and smiled like a memory of a knife. "I do not make that mistake," Cunnington said. Dorne brought his fingers to his lips, then lowered them. "You will find," he said to Cunnington, "that Dorne has made certain arrangements." "I saw the river," Cunnington said. "I saw the women with reeds in their hair. I saw a knot. I have seen men make those arrangements on battlefields and under tables. I have not seen one done with water." "Then you have seen things no one in your country has shown you," Oberyn said. Cunnington looked at him, judged, revised his expectations. "I have come to serve," he said simply. "I do not expect to be thanked for it. I do not expect to be wanted for it. But I will do it until I am killed or useless." "Those are two different conditions," Oberyn said. "Not always," Cunnington said. When Cunnington was gone, having said the right amount of words and unspooling nothing more than a single, effective thread of story about how he had come to the coast and found a ship and paid a price and stood and watched the palace like a man watching the geometry of a siege, Dorne turned to Oberyn and let his own face rest. "Well, he will lead us to battles whether or not we had planned to walk," Oberyn said. He did not sound disappointed. He did not sound pleased. He sounded like a man who had woken to find his bedmate had been teaching a viper to sing. "We will not follow," Dorne said. "We will walk beside, and sometimes we will deliberately lag." "Ah," Oberyn said cheerfully. "Your favorite gate." Areo stood, listening to the palace breathe. In the queen's room, a child slept, and now and again, made the small working noises that meant she was building herself out of two currents, milk and time. In a courtyard, the boy struck the post with his sword and pleased no one and therefore learned more than if he had pleased everyone at once. In the water gardens, men who hated one another's names watched their children splash and held their rage in one hand and their love in the other, and tried to remember which hand could be opened without letting everything drop. Leora learned the baby's cries. There was the hungry one, the angry one, the one that meant a pain in the belly that would pass if the woman from the barge rubbed her lower back with a circle of pressure. She learned that Daenerys' hands would find the air insistently and close on nothing and be pleased with what nothing had given them. She learned very quickly that Viserys would not hold his sister without appearing to disapprove of someone for having required him to hold her, and that he would, deliberately, just barely, stroke her hair with one finger as if auditioning for gentleness in a room where no one else must hear his piece. On the 9th day, Leora took Viserys to the river. She did not tell him they were going to learn anything. She did not tell him anything at all. She let him climb into the boat like a boy who had never done it and then had done it twice and now believed he had invented climbing into boats. The river woman who had tied their knot stood at the prow and did not look at them. The bag one of her grandsons had thrown aboard held a loaf of bread and a knife and a parcel of dates and a flask of water and another of wine. Leora untied the boat herself. Viserys watched and did not offer to help. "Do you know how to row?" she asked him. "Yes," he said, because the answer no was not yet accessible to him as a possible path that did not lead immediately to disgrace. "Good," she said. "Then you will not mind sitting with your back to where we are going," and handed him the oars. The river moved them as it would have regardless. He learned quickly. He was strong in all the wrong places. She reached out at the right moment and adjusted the angle of the blade and said nothing and saw him feel the difference and pretend the knowledge had been his all along. They went up a ways where the water cut at the bank in a long, seductive caress. Leora let the boat drift. The river woman pretended to nap. 2 storks stood stupid and arrogant in the reeds, and then flew when there was no more reason to leave than there had been to stay. "You will not always have men who wish to be your friend," Leora said. "You will sometimes have men who wish to appear to be your friend. You will also have men who wish to appear not to be your friend and to be it anyway. None of this matters. You will have fewer women who wish to be your mother than perhaps you think. You will have more who wish to teach you how to be a decent guest." He did not take his eyes off the oars. "I am no one's guest," he said. "Then you are a thief," she said pleasantly. "Because you are here and you are eating bread someone else baked and you are breathing air someone else has pushed toward you and you have not paid for them." He looked at her, furious, then down at the oars and rowed harder. "We will go back across the sea," he said, as if explaining a plan to a dog with a good face and bad ears. "We will take what was taken. My father." He choked, and there the boy who had been stood up in him and asked the man to sit down for a moment so that he could take a breath, and the man had not yet learned to refuse such requests. "My father was a king," he said after a minute. "My brother was supposed to be," she said, "and is dead." The oars went still. It was not grief that did it. It was anger that had learned to hold perfectly still because motion permitted a leak. She watched him. He could not possibly have loved his brother as a brother. They had been unequal ages and given roles that made closeness a thing the court punished with its amused notice. But he could love the idea of a brother. He could love it like a cliff, especially if it had fallen into the sea. "When my father died," Leora said, making it a thing that had happened a long time ago because it had, "my uncle took me to the water gardens and threw me into a pool." He looked at her, outraged and delighted. "He did," she said, "and I spluttered and came up and he said, 'There, now you know what matters. You put your feet down. You find the bottom. It is slippery, but it is there. You can be angry at me later. For now, kick. If you are frightened, own it. If you are cold, laugh. Laughing warms you. If you are tired, float.' I hated him for a whole day. I loved him every day afterwards. Swim." "I am rowing," Viserys said, which was another way of saying, "You ask ridiculous things of me." "I am speaking of your life," Leora said. "You cannot row it all the time. It is a very long river. You must learn to float when you cannot move without making mistakes." "I do not make mistakes," he said, obedient to the grammar of stubborn boys. "You will," she said, "and then you will make more because that is the way of it. Eventually you will discover that pretending to be infallible feels like wearing mail in the bath." He snorted, despite himself, because the image was ridiculous and therefore relieving. The boat slid along. "Your cousin told me," he said, then hesitated, because to admit that someone else said anything to him was to admit that he listened, and to admit he listened was to admit he learned, and to admit he learned required the admission that he did not already know. "Oberyn," she said. He is the one people call Viper. He is less venomous than he pretends. He told me, Viserys said, that if I am to be king, I must learn to be a person first in a country where kings are withering. That sounds like him, Leora said. He likes sentences that bruise the mouth. Viserys puffed his cheeks and let the breath out. The river woman opened one eye and shut it again, as if to say, you people are always making water into metaphor. I will learn, he said, suddenly, fiercely, surprising himself with his willingness to say so. But I will not forget. He swallowed. I will not forget what they did. Do not, Leora said quietly. Forgetfulness is another kind of blade. Cuts the wrong things. It makes you let go of the rope in a storm because you have forgotten that it is attached to anything important. But choose what you remember. Do not always remember the same thing. He rowed twice more, hard, and then let the oars rest and looked at the current, pretending to go one place only and in truth going dozens of places at once. He said nothing. She did not ask him to. A stork flew overhead with an eel in its mouth and looked offended that anyone was there to see it. By the time they returned to the palace, the wind had veered slightly from the east. The palace took the change into itself and resettled. Messages had arrived. Letters had been returned, or copies of letters, or the lies about letters that would do service for truth if the truth had been inconvenient. In one, the king's hand, or someone with the hand's authority, worded with care a threat wrapped in courtesy and bound with a ribbon of principle. In another, a lord in the Reach sent an overly generous gift of pears and a warning tucked inside the basket. The phrase, "We will help as long as it does not cost us anything." Dorne had called for his lords to gather again at the water gardens. Ironwood came with his jaw set and his sons leaning on their swords. The Fowler woman came with a different dress and the same scorn for men who printed their names too large. 2 Danes, neither of them with a sword with a name, came. Leora knew the story there but did not pick it up. It would stab whomever did. The Manwoodies came late and explained themselves very well with stories that made them sound numerous and tired and in need of oranges. The orphans came in numbers that made it seem like the river had decided to walk to the palace and sit down. Under the sound of the pools, Dorne spoke. He did not speak quickly. He did not make his voice an ornament. He did not say, "We will do this" or "We will do that." He said, "We will not be moved by anger into a place where we will be made humble by hunger." He said, "We will do our counting in the open." He said, "The boy is here, the queen is here, the child is here. We will not pretend otherwise. We will ask the king to be content with being king in a place where kings are content." He said, "There is water for you, each of you, and shade. See, count your children. When you rise, tell me whether you still want war." They sat. They counted. Some of them rose hot and said the thing they had decided to say before they sat down. Some of them rose cooler and said other things. Ironwood rose and sat again without speaking. The Fowler woman spoke softly, slowly, and made many of the men who had believed themselves deaf listen. The river woman rose from her bench, although she had no place in this assembly except the place she gave herself, and she said, "I do not care whether any of you are princes if you act like men with your heads stuck in jars. The river always has more to say to anyone who will wade into it." And then she sat and proceeded to eat bread, as if it were the reason for the meeting, and she had been waiting all morning for it. Leora watched and learned. She learned more from the way Anders Ironwood's sons glanced at one another than from any of the words they put through their mouths. She learned that men believed that if they did not have opinions they would vanish, and that the women believed the same thing but had learned to behave better in public about it. She watched Oberyn turn 4 conversations into one and make their owners feel as if they had done it. She watched Dorne not move while moving everything that needed to be moved. She watched the way the letters quietly arranged themselves between people who could not be seen passing them. She watched a child tug on the sleeve of someone who would, in a later decade, be a villain in anyone's book, and watched that man sit on the tile and let the child braid his hair. That night, Viserys stood in the small walled garden where an orange tree had been coaxed to believe in its own flowers. He touched a leaf. He did it with reverence, in the manner of someone who has been told he should revere and has chosen to believe it for a single moment. Leora stood with him and did not intrude on whatever he was making inside his head. The kitten twined around his ankles. He pretended to mind. "My lady," he said finally. Will they come?" He had not asked which they. He expected her to know. He was learning to have a partner in knowing. It was an important lesson for someone who would expect to be obeyed. "They will come," she said. "Not now, not with banners. Some will come with kisses, some with knives, some with nothing on their faces, which is the worst of all." He nodded, as if that were the answer he had expected. He had wanted her to say no. He had wanted to despise her if she said no, because then it would have meant she was either a liar or a fool, and to despise her would have been simple. Now he would have to resort to something more interesting. "And we?" he said. He stopped. He had learned to ask half as much as he wanted to. It made men tell him more. It made men less certain of themselves. Leora did not know if he had learned this in a way that would make him human, or if he had learned it in a way that would make him a danger that could not be kept. She believed both would be true at once. "We will do as the river woman said," she answered at last. "We will choose our words the way we choose our stepping stones, and we will put our feet down." He looked up at the stars as if he were trying to decide whether they were for him. He did not cry. It would have made him feel foolish. He also did not laugh. It would have been an insult to everything that had been done. He put his hand on the orange tree's trunk. He had the strangest impulse to apologize to it for standing there, for having taken its patience in among his own, for making it witness what would be asked of him. He did not apologize. He learned anger before he learned apology. He was 8. When he went to his bed, Leora went to hers and lay on her back and let her mind stop naming the pieces of the day and allowed it to simply release the pictures. The rope and the water, and the shape the queen's mouth had made a moment before Daenerys had come into air. The angle of Ironwood's in the scratch of reeds in a woman's hair. The storm out at sea that had not yet been born, that would come in a week or a month or a season and visit the coast and, perhaps, do nothing at all to the palace except make men tighten ropes and bless their own hands. There was a war. There was always a war. But there were also other things. There were oranges still on branches, and a kitten that could not be taught to respect the titles of anyone, and a boy who was learning, even if he would not say it aloud, how to float. Dorne, in his chamber, leaned over a map that had been drawn with a more delicate brush than any he had yet found in his life. On it, someone had indicated where the wells lay in a particular part of the desert most men avoided. On it, someone had given the river a different shape than it had taken in spring, and it was correct. He traced the line. He put his finger down where the green blood parted around an island and rejoined itself. He thought there. He thought, "The shape of this year is different and I must remember it." He thought, "We have done a small thing and made it larger simply by agreeing to see it." Far to the north, letters were read, and men who had been certain yesterday that the world was a certain assortment of shapes frowned and reconsidered how their chairs had been carved. Far across the sea, men no one in Sunspear would ever meet made jokes about the softness of Dorne and the heat of its women and the way it always seemed to have done something sly while pretending to do something slow. At the Citadel, a boy wrote down something true in a book and closed it, and that was that. Ariohoda stood, as he always did, and listened to the palace sleep. He had never had a son. He had never had a daughter. But he looked in through the cracked door and saw a baby mouth work around the idea of hunger and then relearn the shape of sleep. And he allowed this new breath to be added to the sums he kept. He knew that there would be blood. He knew that there would be days when the sun made the air into glass and people would walk into it and break themselves. He knew that there would be a night when he would lift his long axe and think, "This is the moment I was taught was intended for me." He did not know whether he would survive that night. He did not know whether he wanted to. The river ran like a sentence that had not yet discovered its own ending. In the morning, Leora would take the boy's hand and teach him the names of the stars in a language he did not know. And he would be offended that he did not know it and then irritated with himself for being offended. And then he would learn 3 names and carry them in his mouth all day as if they were seeds he might plant if he were given a plot of earth. The queen would wake and remember what it was to be full and empty at once. Dorne would write 3 letters and throw one away. Oberyn would steal a fig and make himself known to 4 people who mattered and 3 who did not. Out beyond the coastline, a change in the wind moved over the water and made a ship that had been intending to come turn instead toward the stepstones. In the market, a woman taught her daughter how to wrap bread in leaves so it would not lose its patience by evening. In the palace, the kitten found the kitchen and discovered fish, and the cook discovered that he did not mind a thief if the thief had whiskers. And in a small, quiet, slow room, Daenerys slept, and the rhythm of her breath bent the air toward mercy. The knot Leora had tied lay on a ledge by the window. It would be untied and tied again, in the way such knots need to be handled. It would become a thing to hold onto when the river asked for both hands. It waited, as all the patient objects in the world must wait, for the day someone would ask it why it had been made. No one in Sunspear asked for prophecies in those days. They asked for water and shade and letters that said exactly what they said. They asked their children to listen, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times. Dorne had married a dragon and called the river to witness it. That would not be forgotten soon. Men would come. The world would press. But for a long, unhurried while, the palace was permitted to inhale. The morning never stopped beginning.